Well, hello confirmands. I hope you're well. This is lesson 4 of the 2023-2024 confirmation year. We are doing the early church and Lutheran Christianity, and this is the day that we jump into the small catechism. Remember, Martin Luther said that there are just some things that you have to know if you're going to call yourself a Christian. In the same way that if a person doesn't know what a hammer is and doesn't know what nails are and doesn't know how to size lumber, he can call himself whatever he wants, but it's not a carpenter, right? Carpenter knows those things. Carpenter knows those things in his bones. And if a person doesn't know level and plumb, they're not a mason, no matter what they say about themselves, no matter what they want to think about themselves. They're not a mason. And Luther thought that there was some stuff that you just had to know in your bones if you're going to call yourself a Christian, if you're going to be a Christian. And he thought that you needed to have a broad, deep understanding of at least the Ten Commandments, the Apostles' Creed, and the Lord's Prayer. And that's the beginning. That if you don't know that, you're not a Christian, no matter what you want to say. And then once you know that, then you can start swimming into the deeper water. So we're going to go into the small catechism now, and we're going to stay there for the rest of the year almost. And we're starting with the Ten Commandments. The catechism, remember that word means questions and answers, and we're going to do little questions and little answers about each of the Ten Commandments. Today we're going to introduce the Ten Commandments. We're going to talk about law. We're going to talk about where these Ten Commandments were given and where they came from. And then at the very end we're going to get to the first commandment, and then we'll go forward from there. We do need to say right at the top that there's some confusion among some of you about who this Martin Luther guy is. Most of the phrases that pays come from Martin Luther, and some of you have him mixed up with Martin Luther King Jr. Right? So there's no shame in getting that wrong, but we're going to fix it now, and then there'll be shame if you continue to get it wrong. So pay attention. Martin Luther King Jr. was an African-American civil rights advocate and a Baptist preacher. He was assassinated in 1963. That's 2 years before I was born. So 60 years ago. He is a very important figure in American history. He is an inspirational figure. In school you've probably read his I Have a Dream speech, and you've heard about his various things that he organized, the marches, the letter from the Birmingham jail, all of these things that were really important parts of the American civil rights movement in the 50s and early 60s. Continues to have influence today. His words continue to ring today. That's Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther was a German monk, an Augustinian monk, and a Roman Catholic priest who lived in Germany 500 plus years ago. Right? Totally different guy. Martin Luther thought that there was some stuff wrong with the Catholic Church. He challenged the church to do better, to be better. He had a different vision for what the church is. And 500 years later, Christians like me, like your parents, like you someday, think that Luther had it right, and the things that he stressed continue to be the center of our Christian faith, and that we should listen to him all these hundreds of years later. So again, a totally different guy. Martin Luther, Germany, 500 plus years ago, right? He started his work to reform the Catholic Church in 1517. 1517. So a long time ago. So when you do the phrase that pays, and I tell you it's Martin Luther, don't tell me it's MLK Jr. It's a totally different guy. All right. The other thing we should talk about is how to find stuff in the Bible. 8th and 9th graders, you probably know this, but you might want to follow along too. 7th graders, this is to help you as we go forward in the year. Right? The Bible is 66 books. Today we're in Exodus. That's the second book in the first part of the Bible, the Old Testament. Right? So it's Genesis, Exodus. So that's how you find the first thing. And then all of the books are divided into chapters, 1 through however many chapters there are, sometimes as many as 60 or 70. Right? And those are the big numbers that are in the Bible. So if you open your Bible to Exodus, there'll be a big number 1, a big number 2, a big number 3. Those are the chapters. And then there's little numbers that are in the middle of the words, in the middle of the text. And those are verse numbers. So if you're looking for Exodus chapter 20, verse 1, you first find Exodus, then you do the big numbers 20, and verse 1 would be obviously the first verse of chapter 20. And you can see on the lesson notes, remember you're supposed to be printing the lesson notes every week and looking at them as we do this video. You can see on the lesson notes the little 2 and the little 3 and the little 4. Now it gets a little more complicated than that this week and as you study the Bible, because you can divide each of these verses into parts, right? And so people will do, Exodus 20 verse 2a, which would be the first part of verse 2, and B would be the back half of verse 2. You can do A, B, and C. You can divide verses into 3 parts, and then you kind of have to guess where those lines are. They're not hard and fast, but usually they follow along with punctuation marks, right? So if it's A, B, or C, if I say Exodus 20, verse 2, C, then it would be the last phrase or the last part of that verse, so it would be out of the house of slavery, right? So Exodus 20, verse 2, part C, would be out of the house of slavery. You should be looking at your sheet, then you'd understand what I'm saying. So it's not very complicated, and once you get it, it'll just be, like duck swimming, it'll just be automatic for you. But that's something that you need to know. All right, let's do the first words of the phrase that pays. The God. The God. All right, now, so we're going to read this text together from the Bible, from Exodus 20, starting at verse 1, going through verse 6. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. Okay? So that's 6 verses from the Bible, and that's going to be our springboard for everything that we talk about today. We're going to be referring back to those verses as we go forward today. Okay? Where did this happen? Well, it happened at Mount Sinai. Remember the story that Israel was enslaved in Egypt. God sent Moses and Aaron to get Israel out of their slavery. There wound up being this contest between Pharaoh and Moses of the 10 plagues that God sent punishments, increasingly severe punishments on Egypt, so that Pharaoh would let Israel go. And finally, the 10th plague, if you remember, was the death angel went through Egypt and took the oldest son in each household that wasn't protected by the blood of the lamb on the doors. Remember, and when the angel of death came to a house that had the blood of the lamb on the doors, that angel would pass over that house. And so that's the name of this Jewish holiday, the Passover, that it remembers this whole series of events, how God freed Israel from slavery in Egypt. So then Israel goes out into the desert, God feeds them, God protects them, God gives them water, brings them to Mount Sinai, and at Mount Sinai, Moses goes up Mount Sinai, speaks with God, and God gives Moses the 10 Commandments and sends them down. These are big stories. We'll do them in more detail in the Old Testament year. 9th graders and 8th graders should know that story about what happens when Moses is up on the mountain and the golden calf and all that. But 7th graders will get there. At any rate, Moses comes down with these laws, right? And the first one is, I'm the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods before me, right? So the thing that you need to remember, though, is our Jewish neighbors, they get a little puzzled when we talk about, that these are the 10 commandments of God. These are 10 of the commandments of God, they say, but God gave us 613 commandments in the Old Testament, all of which are to be kept. We don't have any fight with that, but that's not what we're saying. When we talk about the 10 commandments, we're not saying that these are, the only things that a Christian's supposed to do. I mean, Jesus was very clear that there's more stuff we're supposed to do. Right? Jesus said that if you wanted to summarize all the commandments, all the law and all the prophets, it would love God, heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. We just think that these 10 commandments need to be learned and need to be known because they reflect natural law. That the God who created this world has woven the necessity of these commandments into this world. And that if you don't do these things, society can't stand. Families can't endure. Can you imagine a society that allowed, rape or lying in court or murder or theft and neighbors taking from neighbors? I mean, you can't have a society like that. So we think that these 10 commandments are not, the beginning and the end of what you're supposed to do as a follower of Jesus. We think these are the baseline requirements for life in society. And remember, our Jewish neighbors, they're onto something when they say that God's law is a great gift to us because it keeps us alive. And we talked about the road by my house with the big dips, right? That if you don't stay on your side of the road, you come over one of those hills in the wrong lane, you're going to die, right? There's going to be someone there. There's going to be a tractor parked there. There's going to be a truck there, and you're going to die. That the law keeps you alive. The speed limit keeps you alive. The lane markers keep you alive. The other rules of the road keep you alive. And we think that the 10 Commandments are like that. That these are the things that keep you and society alive. And they're a great gift to us. You need to know them. But again, don't think for 1 second that once you have the commandments nailed down, that's all that you need to do before God. This is a beginning point, not an ending point. All right, there's a couple more things we should say before we jump in. This should be review for the 8th and 9th graders, but we'll cover it, all together again, right? Not only is the law a great gift to us, right? But the law has some particular uses. The law is anything that you're supposed to do or anything that you're not supposed to do, right? As opposed to gospel. We talked about this in the first lesson, that God's word comes to us as law and gospel. Law is stuff you're supposed to do, stuff you're not allowed to do. Gospel is God's blessings, God's promises, God's forgiveness, God's grace. The law has some purposes for us, right? We've already touched on it, that it keeps you alive, makes society possible. But for you, the law tells you what you're supposed to be doing, right? And what you're not supposed to be doing. If you wake up some morning and think, should I go to school or should I knock over a gas station, steal money from a gas station, the law helps you there. You should not steal. You should, in fact, go to school, and you should honor your teachers while you're there. We got a couple commandments in there, right? Not steal and honor those in authority over you. So the law tells you what to do and what not to do. It tells our rulers, whether that's a legislature or a prince, what kind of laws to make for the smooth governing of society. That's an important stuff. The law also is a mirror for us, right? So the law says that I'm supposed to do this. And most of the time I do. But sometimes I do this. And this gap between what I'm supposed to do and what I actually do is a place where I need to go to God, and I need to apologize. I need to ask for forgiveness. I need to be more gentle with you when there's a gap between the law and how you act, right? That I need to grow in mercy for the people around me. That being aware of this gap, right, is an incredibly important part of me developing into the person I'm supposed to be, and of you developing in. It's about honesty. It's about integrity. That there's a gap between what you should do and what you actually do, what you should think and what you actually think. And the law, the clarity of the law, shows us that gap, drives us to our knees, and helps us have peace with God, have truth between us and God, right? Sometimes Lutherans wonder if there's a third use of the law, that, now that we're baptized and filled with the Holy Spirit, that maybe we can keep the law better. I mean, maybe you need a better pastor. That's not my experience. My experience all these years later is that there's still a gap between what I should do and what I actually do. I hear the Apostle Paul say the same thing in the Bible, that there's a gap between what he should do and what he does. Every Christian I know, there's this gap. And the ones that are really scary are the ones who think that there's not a gap, because there always is. So I think the third use of the law is something you can ignore. The purpose of the law is so that you know what to do and so that you have integrity before God as you're aware of the distance between what you should do and what you actually do. All right, one more piece, right? When we talk about, these are the laws that God gave. Let's get clear what we're talking about. What is a God? So there is the God, right? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, right? Living in this eternal, beautiful, mutual dance of love and respect and regard that's so deep and so wide and so inclusive that it'd be a lie to say anything other than there's one God. That's God. Anything else is not God, right? Any picture you have in your head, the white guy on a throne with the beard and light shooting out of his head, that ain't God. But that's at least closer than some of the other things that are running to be God. There are lots of things in your life that want to be your God, right? Money wants to be your God. Popularity wants to be your God, right? That you do anything as long as you're popular. You'll say stuff, you'll post stuff, just so that people will like you. Being rich, being free, sometimes people's education or their standing, that's their God, that's the thing. And Luther said, when you're talking about a God, right, a God is something that you count on to rescue you from trouble, or something that you count on to bring good stuff to you, right? So for, again, a lot of people, it's money. That, if I'm in trouble, what do I need? I need cash, right? How do I get good things? How do I get what I need in my life? Money, right? But money can't stop the cancer. I mean, it can get you treatments, but at a certain point, it can't stop the cancer, right? Money can't restore someone lost to you that's been lost. Money can't bring back a dead goldfish, right? You can get a new goldfish, but it can't bring back a dead goldfish. So money is a very, very limited God, and it's a brutal God. I mean, once you start worshiping money, chasing money, it's like drinking seawater. You never have enough. You never feel full. You never feel safe, right? It's a bad, bad God. And the real God is very clear that God won't play second banana to any of those things, that God won't be in second place in your life. If you want some other God, God will let you have that other God, but you won't have the real God at your call, right? That God won't play second to money or to popularity or to physical beauty or to anything else that you count on to rescue you from trouble or to bring good things into your life, right? That God commands us to recognize and acknowledge that everything good comes from Him. Butterflies, baby smiles, spring rains, all come from God, right? And that God is the only being in the universe that can rescue you no matter what happens, whether that you're alive or whether you're dead, whether you're well, whether you're sick, whether you're rich, whether you're poor. God has access to you and can rescue you in any of those situations. The next two words in the phrase that pays, of this. Of this. While we're paused here. On the phrase that pays, you need to read it to yourself before you hand it in to me, because if it doesn't make sense, then you missed something, right? These are short little sentences, right? We've now done 4 words. If you don't have 4 words that kind of make sense together, you need to go back. And as long as we're paused here, you got to put your name on these sheets, right? Some of you are driving me absolutely crazy, not putting your names on these sheets, and then I got to try to figure out who I remember being in class and who turned something in. Come on, you can do better than that. All right. So now that we've talked about what the law is, who God is, where we got these verses from Exodus 20, verses 1 through 6. Now we can jump in to talking about this first commandment, right? That I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. Okay, we think that that's the first commandment, but there is some disagreement about that among Christians, right? Take a look with me at verse 4, right? Find the little 4, and then we're going to read from verse 4 through 5a, so through the first half of verse 5. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether it's in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that's on the earth beneath, or that's in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. All right. There are some Christians who think that that's a whole other commandment, that that's not part of the first commandment, I'm the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods before me. We think that that's clearly part of the first commandment. It's like commandment 1A, right? Don't have any of their gods. Don't make yourself statues of fish and worship fish. Don't make yourself statues of birds and worship birds. You know, don't be dumb. There's one God, it's me, don't have any other gods. We think that's all one deal, one package. Sometime in your life you may wind up in a church that says that those are two separate commandments. Commandment 1 and commandment 2, right? I'm the Lord your God, don't have any other gods. Number 2, don't have any other, don't make idols. Then what they do is they just change the numbers going forward, and then they put 9 and 10 together into one commandment about coveting. That's fine. I mean, it's not worth fighting about. I don't stand outside the Baptist church with a bullhorn and say, you guys are wrongly numbering the commandments. They do it their way, we do it our way, right? We do it the way that the church, in most times, in most places, has done it around the world. We think that clearly, 4 through 5a is part of that first commandment, because then God gives the warning in 5b and 6 that if you don't do this thing, right? If you don't keep me as the only God, your children are going to suffer to the 3rd or 4th generation. And if you do it, you're going to be blessed down through the generations, right? So we think it's all one. But is it worth having a big fight about? No, it's not. You are in a Lutheran confirmation class. You're studying a Lutheran small catechism. Just learn the numbering here. Do you need to know the numbers of the commandments? Yeah, you need to know the numbers of the commandments, right? Again, if you're going to be a Christian, you have to know the Lord's Prayer, the Creed, and the 10 Commandments. And so, learn everything you can about them. So it might be interesting for you to know that there are some traditions, some Christian traditions, that then don't have any statues in their church at all, don't have any paintings in their church at all, don't have any representations of animals or human beings in their churches at all, because they think that could be an idol and a violation of this commandment. We don't see it that way. We think that don't have any other gods, including don't make statues or paintings that you worship, right? We think that's all one. And why do we have pictures of Jesus or statues of the Holy Family? Because we think it's an amazing miracle that God became a human being. And that when we have a picture of the Holy Family or a statue of Mary, right, we don't worship that, right? We don't pray to that. We remember the great gift that God has given us, becoming a human being like we are. And like we talked about in the Ascension thing, one of the great mysteries and wonders of the universe is that somewhere in the dance of the Holy Trinity, there's a human being, that Jesus still has his body, that there's a guy in the dance of the Blessed Trinity. And that's an amazing thing, and that we honor that, we remember that in our art. But you may wind up in a church that's just white walls, no statues, no pictures of any kind, and that's what's going on there, then you'll know. While we're talking about that, stuff that's happening around the world that you may wander into, 2 more words of the phrase that pays: world is. World is. Okay? Now, let's go back to that 5b through 6. So 5b would be the second half of verse 5, right? For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. All right, so let's get clear here. Why should you do this? Why should you keep this commandment? Because your kids will pay if you don't, and your family will bless you if you do. And we need to figure out together how we're supposed to read that. We don't have a video, we don't have a sound recording, we don't even have any emojis in it, like it's a text message. So is this a threat, right? Is this a promise, or is this just, God telling you how things are? So a couple of things to think about here. You and I are Christians, and we read the whole Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, through the lens, through the life of Jesus. That we think that Jesus is the perfect reflection of God, that Jesus is God. And that when we're reading the Bible, God's Word, we start with Jesus, whom we know, and we understand God's word through Jesus. How would Jesus say this? What do we know about Jesus that shapes how we hear this, right? So, if I show you a message and you know it's from your grandma, you import everything you know about your grandma into that message to understand it. And even if it's a little abrupt or a little weird, you know Nana, you know how she talks, you know that she loves you, right? That right now she's probably baking you molasses cookies. And so you hear that sentence in her voice. I want you to hear the whole of the Bible in Jesus' voice. Let me do it another way. It's in your notes, right? When I was a kid, it was a different time in the world, right? Kids were safe outdoors. We would leave, we'd have breakfast in the morning in the summer, and we'd leave our homes, and we wouldn't come back until dinner time at night. And we didn't have cell phones. Our parents didn't have any idea where we were, right? We were within 7 or 8 block radius of our house. And a lot of the time we spent, playing games with each other, right? We played a lot of street baseball, a lot of stickball, right? And there was a place where we played stickball that was around the corner from one of the goofiest people I've ever met. This was an old dude. He had a beautiful lawn. He loved his lawn, and he would sit in the front window of his house looking out at his lawn. He had big lights on the side of his house and big speakers, and if anyone touched his lawn, he'd push a button and you'd get this, get off my lawn, right? I'm not proud of this, but I'm guessing that you're a little like me. We loved touching his lawn, right? I mean, he'd do the thing for, a cat would wander across his lawn and scare the cat out of one of its lives. If we touched his lawn, if a ball rolled on his lawn, and we had to go on his lawn to get the ball, he was the meanest, craziest guy in my childhood, or one of them, right? And there are a lot of people who think God's like that. That God's sitting on the edge of heaven with a buzzer, to light you up if you do something crazy, or if you do something bad, or if you make a mistake, right? Oh, God, I see you, I hate you. That's not God, right? When we read the Bible, what do we see? Do we see that guy? No, we have John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Well, that's not the guy in the window, right? We got God the Father periodically poking into Jesus' life and saying, this is my Son, I'm well pleased with him. Or this is my Son, my beloved Son, listen to him. That the stuff that Jesus was doing, the healing, the blessing, the loving, the feeding, God the Father was on board with all of that. Right? We got Jesus insisting over and over that he and the Father are one. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. If you've heard me, you've heard the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? The Father and I are one. Right? So Jesus is not the guy in the window with the buzzer waiting to light you up. Jesus doesn't hate you. He's not mad at you. God isn't looking for some opportunity to punish you. Right? And when you read the Bible, you read it through that knowledge. You read it with that awareness. That this is someone who loves me. This is someone who cares for me. This is someone who came for me. This is someone who poured out his own life to set me free and to give me hope and to give me peace. And so these words that I'm reading, even if they sound hard, they come from a loving heart. They come from a loving place. 2 words of the phrase that pays, right? Riches, pleasure. Riches, pleasure. Here's a huge idea, this is one of those ideas that you can think about the rest of your life. Right? Whenever you read about the anger of God, sometimes called the wrath of God, right? I want you to remember that that's a manifestation of the love of God. It's not that God hates you. It's not that God doesn't want you to have a good life, a pleasant life, a pleasurable life. It's a manifestation of the love of God, and you know all about this, right? So, imagine that you're at the Minnesota State Fair with me. There'll be 120,000 people there, right? And imagine an 8-year-old kid thinks it's funny to hide from his parents, right? So 1 minute they're all together walking around, looking at stuff, eating a corn dog, and on their way to the candy, the what's it called? Candy floss. That's not right. Cotton candy. eating a corn dog and on their way to the cotton candy stand, and 1 minute the kid's there and the next minute the kid's gone. Right? Now he just ducked behind some garbage cans as a silly. Right? But the parents look that way and there's 30,000 people and they don't see their kid. 30,000 people, they don't see their kid. 30,000 people, they don't see their kid. 30,000 people, they don't see their kid. They are going to be frantic. Right? Did this kid get abducted? Is he lost? Did he get hurt? Is he laying someplace crying? Is he worried? We failed our kid. The parents are going to be nuts. And if the kid pops out from behind the garbage cans and says, "Hey, it's just a joke," you're going to see some wrath. You're going to see some anger. You're going to hear some voices. Right? It's not going to be good for that kid. Right? Because they hate him? No, because they love him. Right? We took an exchange student up to the Birkebeiner ski race, where there's 10,000 people all wearing puffy coats and stocking hats with the ball on top, right? And he had an idea where he wanted to watch the race, and we said, okay, we have other responsibilities. You stay right here. Don't move. Don't go anywhere. Didn't have a cell phone. Decided that he knew better than we did, and he wandered away. We had no idea where he was, right? He doesn't have the money he needs, he doesn't have the language he needs, he doesn't have a cell phone, he's mixed in with 10,000 people in puffy coats and the same sorts of hats. We were not happy, right? Because we hated him? No! Because we cared about him, because we were responsible for him, right? You might have in your family someone who's dabbled in drugs or in criminality, right? People go nuts. I mean, you want to see your parents go nuts, right? Do one of those things, and your parents will really, really show you at a high volume how much they love you, and it's going to look a whole lot like wrath, but it's about love, about terror that you're throwing your life away, right? You understand this. So when we read about God's anger, God's warnings, God's wrath, you filter that through the love of Jesus, that this is someone that cares about you, that doesn't want you to hurt yourself, right? When God says don't do this, it's the same sort of thing when your parents say don't slide down the stairs in a laundry basket, because the basement floor is stronger than your teeth, right? Don't be dumb. Don't do that. Okay. And God says here, look, you get this stuff wrong that I'm telling you, your children's children are going to pay. You get it right, your children's children are going to bless you, are going to say that you are a good, good guy. Look, it's always the children who pay when the parents do the wrong thing, right? If I'm a drunk, if I'm a drug addict, if I'm a criminal, my kids are going to pay more than anybody else, right? It's going to shape the whole family. Their kids are going to pay. If I'm a decent man, if I'm a kind man, if I'm a loving man, if I help them with their education and make them good, successful, decent people, they're going to bless me, their children are going to bless me, and their grandchildren are going to bless me, right? That's just the way it is. So when God says here, do this, or there's going to be consequences down through the generations, baby, that's just the way things are. That's just the way things are. All right. Before we jump into the Small Catechism, you see that we got a section there at the bottom of the page from the Small Catechism, right? We should talk about the structure of the thing. That every time there's the commandment, then there's a question, what does this mean? And the answer, what it means, always starts with, we are to fear, love, and trust God, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Sometimes people get hung up on this fear, love, and trust God. Again, I think you know all about this, right? I mean, your first impulse with your parents, those of you in safe homes, right? Let's assume for the sake of argument that we're talking only about safe homes. That your parents love and trust you, and that you love and trust them. But if you did something just mind-bogglingly stupid, right? If you stole something, if you decided to, I'm not even going to give you ideas, right? You set the couch on fire, right? You do something just mind-bogglingly stupid, right? You're going to be afraid of what's going to happen. You know that there's going to be punishment. You know that they're going to be disappointed, right? Whether it's death by lecture or something else, that there's a fear there. What's going to happen? What does this mean? Say you have a pet tiger, right? It's a bad idea, by the way, to have a pet tiger, right? There were some magicians in Las Vegas that had pet tigers, and for 10 years they had these pet tigers that they'd use in their shows and lived with them until one day one of the tigers decided to see how good the magician tasted. And it was really, 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 really bad, right? But let's say you have a pet tiger, sleeps in your room, right? It might be the best cuddle bunny that you ever had, right? You know, nice and warm and big purr and you know, lots of tiger to cuddle. But you're never really going to forget about those teeth. You're never really going to forget about those claws. You know, that this is an 800-pound killing machine, right? So you're going to have a certain respect for that tiger, and you're not going to let people visiting your house pull its tail, right? That's a bad idea. You know, or poke it in the eye. It's a bad idea. So when we talk about fear, love, and trust God, God threw stars out of God's hand. God created everything that is with a word. You know, let there be light, when there was light, right? This makes a tiger look like nothing. It makes a killer whale look like nothing. That when we're talking about God, yeah, it's a lot of love and a lot of trust because of Jesus' witness, but there's also this awareness that you can't demand stuff from God. You can't grab God by the lapels and say, hey, make this happen for me or else. Right? You can't disrespect God, that God is above beyond anything we can ask or imagine. And God's not going to be ignored. God has decided to be our parent in the same way you can't just ignore your earthly parents. God is going to work with you and in you. And, you know, sometimes your parents might say to you, we can do this a couple of ways. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. But you're going to do it my way. And God, you know, reserves the right to talk like that to us, right? There's an easy way, there's a hard way. But I'm in charge. And I'm going to punish and I'm going to bless based on your obedience to what I tell you. So when we're talking about fear, love, and trust God, I don't want you hiding under your bed quaking that God's going to throw lightning at you. Again, the guy with the buzzer in the window, right? But I do want you to know that God who loves you more than your parents love you and has the same sort of impulses that your parents have to shape you, to direct you, to teach you, and to discipline you when you insist, right? And sometimes that discipline can feel pretty bad. Trust me on this, okay? All right. The next, did we do the next words, the phrase, the pace? I'm not sure if we did or not, right? So if we didn't, it's and pride with a period. If you already wrote and pride, then don't write them again. I got a little bit out of place on my notes. So and pride with a period. So just to help you, because I'm not sure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 words in this phrase that pays this week. 10 words. If you don't have 10 words, you got to go back and you got to find them. Okay, now into the catechism. Catechism, questions and answers. Right? The first commandment, you shall have no other gods. Right? Only God should be your God. What does it mean? We're to fear, love, and trust God above all things. Okay, it's pretty clear, right? More than money, more than beauty, more than your education, more than your relationships, right? More than your opportunities, more than your desires. You fear, love, and trust God above everything else. Okay, can you do this? Right? I mean, here's the law: fear, love, and trust God more than anything else, above all things. Can you do it? Sure. I mean, you can remember that money is a tool, right? There's no problem with money. It's a tool. It's a very useful tool. You can do a lot of really important things with money. But when money tries to push God off the throne, now we have a problem, right? Can you remember that? Sure. Right? Can you remember that physical beauty fades and that, you know, beauty can't rescue you from ultimate things? But it's a tool. It's a useful thing to have, to be good looking. Sure, you can remember that. Is it God? No, this is God. Only God. And that you're supposed to use your beauty and your education and your money and your resources and your connections, all that in service of God. Can you remember that? Yeah. Will you do it perfectly? No. I mean, if I told you today that I was going to give you $1 million, right? My guess is that you'd feel safer than you felt before you got the $1 million. That now you have something that can keep you out of trouble or help you. Well, if that's true, you got to think, do you trust money more than God? because God is with you and can rescue you and will keep you and will provide for you, right? You don't need me to give you the $1 million for that. Now, there are uses for $1 million, right? If I gave you $1 million and say, all right, now I can do this important thing, okay, great, you've kept this. But I got to tell you that just for me, there's this that's very clear, right? You shall have no other gods, right? We're fear, love, and trust God above all things. And then I think, if I had that $1 million, or, if I had whatever it is, that there's a gap between the law and how I live, how I think, how I talk, when I'm afraid, right? When I'm worried, when I don't know how things are going to work out, there's a gap. And so, right here in this gap between God's law and how I live, I have to admit that I'm not who I'm supposed to be, right? And it's not like we had to get to commandment number 8 for me to figure out that there's a problem in my life. We got it right here at number 1, that I don't always fear, love, and trust God above all things. And neither do you. And neither does anyone else, right? So already we're diagnosed that we have a problem. Already we know that we're not who we're supposed to be, right? We know that these commandments are going to be aspirational, right? That they're beyond us, that we can't keep them perfectly. It doesn't mean that you stop trying, right? I mean, you haven't run a 4-minute mile, but it's out there. And if you're a serious runner, you want to do that. You haven't run a marathon, but you know that if you train enough, you could. These commandments are aspirational. We're trying to get there. We're trying to live into this. And one of the reasons that we come to church, that we gather together, is because we encourage one another. We help one another. We remind one another. And sometimes we have hard conversations with one another when we've drifted away from following the commandments, from listening to God's will, that we have to say to each other, you're on a path that leads into the dark, right? So already we know this first commandment, that we need rescue, that we need redemption, that there's this gap between who we're supposed to be, who God says, do this, or the generations beyond you will pay. And already I know that I'm not doing it right. And so I need God to rescue me. I need God to protect my children and my grandchildren. I need God to help me do this better. So, that already we go to God in prayer and we say, please help us, set us free, remind us, lead us, rescue us, right? This is a big part of the Christian's prayers. And you're never going to get beyond this. You're going to be doing the same thing when you're 87 years old as you're going to do now when you're 12, 13, 14, 15. Because this is a lifetime struggle that we're all in together. All right, the phrase that pays this week and many weeks comes from Martin Luther. Remember, that's not Martin Luther King Jr., totally different guy, different continent, different centuries, right? Different people, both important. Martin Luther. I'm looking forward to hearing from you on Wednesday and going through all of this together. There is a lot here, right? How to read the Bible, what the law is for, the commandments, the structure of the catechism. We've got a lot to do. Put your name on your homework. All right, I care about you. Talk to you soon. Bye.